Okay. Well, I want to welcome everybody here tonight. It is January the 3rd of 2025. That's something new to say now, 2025 instead of 24. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday, and we're going to start back up with our Constitution calls. And tonight we have with us Salty Toes. We have Lowtide and Mason and Jim and myself, Jax. So we're going to go ahead and get started and get on with what we're going to talk about tonight is the true history of our Constitution. And I want to go to you, Mason, and let you talk and go ahead and give us what you know about the true history of the Constitution.
All right. Well, it's not a secret. It's something that's available to anybody that wants to look. Um, you'd start off with a original literal print of the original 1788 Constitution, which would be a good starting point. And from there, you can look at the Articles of Confederation. It's got information in there that's pertinent to the Constitution, which deals with the sovereignty of the states. And the Article 4 in the U.S. Constitution is pretty specific about the people. And so is Articles, I believe it's 2 and 3 in the Articles of Confederation, because they mirror each other. The most important part of that Articles of Confederation was the fact that they make a statement that the sovereignty is retained by the states. And I don't care what anybody wants to consider about that sovereignty. It was there when the founders first broke sand in this country. Uh, they came here with a certain mindset, which was to get away from the reptilians and the other demonic entities that were controlling Europe. And even though they were, I'll say, slightly captured in the process, they had some of them actually joined in the documents that were written. But the fact remains is that we're now in a state where a lot of people don't really have an understanding about the Constitution, and it's not complicated when you consider the fact that the sovereignty is still in the people. It was in the people at the Revolution. It never changed. I don't care how many amendments they write or how many so-called constitutions they put into somebody's back room. That's not the issue here, because the energy that's going along with this program that we're now involved with, some people call it the ascension. It's nothing more than a process that has been in existence from time immemorial. There's no beginning to it, but it takes a bit of exercise for individuals privately or personally in order to get the revelations that it might take in order to convince them in their own minds where they are, who they are, how they got here, and what the assignment that they may have acquired as a result of it. So the Constitution of itself is nothing more than just a piece of paper that a bunch of people put down certain things in it, and its number one intent, the purpose for the thing, was to regulate and control the commercial world outside of the people and their private. And there's enough case law history on this that confirms that the private citizen has the right to his privacy. He has the right to his um, travel. He has the right to his life, his liberty, property. Excuse me, his property, and those things were an attribute actually that began all the way back with Magna Carta, because they were all being beat up by the monarchs. And so we're now in a position where this great transition that we're going through is going to affect everything and everybody. Uh, I don't care what your mindset is. I don't care what you believe. It don't matter. It's like throwing a duck in a pond. It's going to get wet, and once it's wet, uh, it's most likely going to swim around in there because it finds out it ain't so bad after all. But the way the human consciousness is working right now is most people are dragging their feet or they're trying to figure out some way to get away from having to deal with any of the stuff that's confrontational, which is a whole lot actually, but it's not complicated. And this Constitution thing, 1788, by the way, the June 21 was the date that the ninth state ratified it. And it's been amended with the Bill of Rights, which is 10 articles that they added that Hamilton was adverse to. And the reason he was adverse to it, because he already had an inkling. If you people keep adding to this document, which is only about regulating the commercial acts of individuals amongst the states and outside, if you want to get involved with a foreign country or whatever. But the Constitution regulated that commercial activity. And that's what it was written to regulate, not the private side. There was nothing anywhere in it that says Congress shall have power to, and then talk about private rights of the people. It's not there. And there's no amendment that was written that claims those words. But they have done a lot of little things in the amendment process, starting with 11, when they took the sovereignty away from the Supreme, or the right of the people as sovereign to sue a state in the Supreme Court in an original jurisdiction. That was the 11th Amendment. And from there, it just went downhill. So that was the first hit. Now, Congress, in its ignorant arrogance and all the things that it's been involved in over the course of over 200 years of our history, is a matter of record. And if you really want to get your head into some of this stuff, you might start with the first Congress. Look at the Judicial Act. Look at the Naturalization Law. Look at the Coinage Act. All those things are up front. Uh, and once you get an understanding about what that was about and why they put those in there, you might have an idea about how we got to where we are right now and whether we're here lawfully or according to some opinionated reptilian person who's only interested in one thing, getting control over everything and everybody here. And therein lies the great challenge, because most people aren't really interested in confrontation. They're not interested in doing something because it's a little bit scared, or they might have a little bit of a problem with their own ego or whatever it might be. It's irrelevant. The fact remains that we're all here together, and that universal love and that unconditional love factor is the thing that's going to move this whole thing forward, irrespective of what anybody might think. So there's going to be a lot of challenges that's coming up. Now, this Constitution thing, like I said, and the history is pretty clear on this topic. Congress has the power to regulate commercial activities wherever. All right. Now, it doesn't give Congress in the U.S. the right to regulate the commerce activities inside the state or inside the county. But if that commercial activity crosses over state line, then the U.S. government has developed or created or been given the power to regulate that. Okay. But as long as people are acting in their privacy and they're not advertising and they're not looking for a license to do something that they would otherwise have the right to do, because a license is a license to steal or kill, depending upon your profession. And it's not complicated. But until people start to wake up to the reality of this distinction between who they truly are, and I don't need to get into all the technical attributes of each individual and what they might be, where they came from, what their ethnicity is, all that's pretty much irrelevant with respect to this little chat that I'm giving you guys, because sooner or later everybody's going to realize that everybody's been something everybody else has been, and this whole thing is a test on each of us to be able to develop that neutral place, that unconditional love factor, if you want to call it that. So the Constitution as it stands has no authority whatsoever over anybody, period. And the reason is because it only applied to commerce. commercial elements. And the fact that there hasn't been a qualified elector since at least the 1805 or 1802 election cycle was, remember, they started muddying the water with the status and the qualifications of electors almost in the beginning. And if you take the time to go follow the elector status and the freeholder elements, you'll find out that it was trashed way back in the beginning. So there isn't even a single person in the system right now that's lawfully qualified to be there, unless somebody woke up and fixed a voter registration and managed to get a freehold and happened to be the right qualifications that it was set up in the first place. There's nobody there qualified. So Constitution as it stands is just another piece of paper, and the people are starting to ask questions. Who am I? What are my rights? And I can list them. They're not complicated. But as it stands right now, most people are unable or unwilling, or just simply don't know what those rights might be and how to go about demanding them. I had an interesting issue just came up recently with respect to a failed credit card um, account, and the courts are still open to filings. Now, whether the courts are going to stay open for filings during the next month or so, that remains to be seen. But there's documents that have already been sent in, filed, recorded, however you want to call that, dealing with the actual violations of some of the very prominent laws in our country, which one of them would be the Gold and Silver Clause, Article 1, Section 10, and Congress's power to actually print money and circulate it as in place as for debt throughout the states. Well, neither one of those things have ever shown up in an amendment, and so those are the big questions that are now getting ready to cycle through the judicial system. Whether or not it gets all the way to the top, that's up to them. So just to let you know that there are still things that can be done, depending on where you are, what you're doing, or what your issues might be in the system, that you can still take part. I don't know, how long these opportunities are going to be there, but it's there now. It's there in the moment. So I'll turn this thing over to whoever else wants to have a chit chat, or talk, or ask questions, or make comments, or whatever you need.
Well, does anybody have any questions? And I think I have a question. I'm not sure what it is, but I feel like I don't know that we got as far as I wanted to get tonight. Let me see. Let me see if Jim would like to give us a true history. What you think, Jim? The true history is.
Well, Mason covers the original up to 1860 very well. Now, under Lincoln, a Scottish corporation was smuggled into Delaware, and then it was smuggled into D.C. So in the landscape for the last going on 7 generations, what we have around us is a corporate masquerade. And the European elements tried to do a end run around the Declaration of Independence. And certain things have been discovered, such as in the second section of Congress, 1858, they started monkeying with our definitions. And so earlier, Mason utilized the 1828 Merriam-Webster's dictionary. The 1856 was the last congressionally approved Bouvier's dictionary. And then they moved us into an attempt to put us all into the sea-going commerce. And they did it with subterfuge. And they masqueraded. A lot of people are hearing about the straw man and the tin account. number, and that is all coming to an end. 90% of the governmental structure that was put into place under FDR is about to get gutted. 3 major court cases have been reaffirmed and stacked on each other. Norton versus Shelby County, over 100 years ago. About 3 years ago, West Virginia versus EPA, and the recent Chevron deference. So we're going to hear that maybe 90+% of Washington, D.C. is going to be gutted. The authority is going to be put back into the states. We have American institutions that were laid aside by Lincoln that we're going to be rebuilding. And you're going to hear about the American Congress being rebuilt and reseated in Philadelphia Hall. Yeah, folks, that's where the American Congress sits. Where our contractors who were hired back in the late 1700s went off the rails with us. Their contracts have been called into legitimacy of their performance. And the municipal contractor is withdrawing from America. So when you say the state of Illinois in all caps, the state of Texas in all caps, the county of in all caps, that's what's being removed. Embrace the change, folks, because what's coming is a lot of freedom. I just had a discussion with someone today about the new founding of a university. What's about to be undertaken is a 30-year generational rebuilding of knowledge. Most of us don't know what we don't know, and it's got to be spelled out, reabsorbed, and we have many things to unlearn, to relearn. And for most of us, it's kind of a struggle. That's pretty much where I'm at right now. I yield.
Well, thank you for adding that in. Now, does anybody have any questions? You've heard 2 of our speakers, and does anybody have any questions with what either one of them said? No questions? Well, I do know that we had a question in the room. Let me go see if I can find that. Let's see. Okay, here it is. Somebody on the team had a question that came up for Mason, it looks like. If you will ask Mason to explain how the land belongs to the people and how to avoid paying for mortgages to rent. It was on a previous call, she said. Are you there, Mason?
I'm here.
Okay, did you understand what that question was?
Yeah, I understand it fully.
Okay, I figured you would. Okay.
Well, most people, because they don't understand the banking system, they don't have an idea about how they got into it. And it's not complicated. Uh, it takes a little bit of study research to find out who you are and what you are in the system and why the banking system has no authority over you or the land. Um, this is not real complicated when in principle. Okay, the problem that has been in place for all this time is the fact that the enforcement powers that have the jurisdiction and the authority to address entities that are involved in either, I'll just say it as I know it is, treasonous activities against the sovereignty of this nation. And the banking system is probably the biggest, even though I know there are other groups out there that are every bit as instrumental in doing terrible things to people other than banking. But the question is about banking. So um, the land in this country belongs to the generic term the people. Uh, it was won at the Revolution, according to all the information that we have available. The evidence of it is that the country is completely covered with land patents. And in fact, I don't think there's a state in the Union outside maybe of Texas, and I still haven't quite gotten an answer on that one. But most of the states that I know of, except for Texas, is completely and totally covered with patents, except for portions of, I'll give you one good state, Nevada. And I've since in my own study and research, I've discovered that 90, I believe it's 95% of the state of Nevada is supposedly owned by the federal government. And it was like, well, that was an interesting comment that the system was willing to put out there, because I have a simple question which deals with the United States government and its authority to own land anywhere in this country. And if it doesn't come within the provisions of forts, arsenals, magazines, and some other needful building that's directly related to one of those powers of Congress, then it can't hold land title. And the funny part is that all the land in this country is allodium to the people. And the only thing that keeps a city hall from being torn down is a group of fed up, tired freeholders who are seeing that it's time to get rid of this demonic snake pit, tear it down, and tell them to go move somewhere else. But the point I'm getting at here is that your mortgage is a fraudulent conveyance. It violates the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling in Craig versus Missouri, which is in the documents posted, because there is no authority, period, for any entity to create a promissory note to circulate as money. And of course, the obvious point of connection with that statement is Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the Constitution. And I know for a fact that most people have never read the document. They don't have any understanding about the true nature of our monetary system, because they've been led to believe everything else in the world is money other than what it has been identified with in our Constitution. And I'm not talking about some amended version, because the original Constitution identifies Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 as gold and silver coin as payment of debts. And no state can use anything but that. It's a prohibition against the states. And the states can't mint it either. Only Congress can create the rule of minting of coin and regulating its value, including foreign coin. So nobody can come in here and bring in their alien coins and drop it in the cash register and say it's good, and the Treasury finds out that it's not. They send the bill back to the country of its origin. So there's a lot of little pieces to our history that most people don't really understand, but this mortgage thing should be no big deal once you understand that no bank can make a promissory note money. And that's exactly what your promised to pay, your promissory note on your mortgage, did. It paid off the loan. And there's a case in our log. It's called Bank of Montgomery versus Jerome Daly. It's a fairly famous case, only from the standpoint that the banking system has tried, without success, ever since it was enacted in 1965, to strike it from the records. They didn't want this case out there for anybody to be able to see and read, to get an understanding about what actually happens when you apply for a loan and you sign a note and they give you a check or a wire transfer, or they just simply issue the payment to the person that you bought the property from. They don't want you to know what happened to that note after you signed it. And that little case is evidence specific of what exactly happens. And the Craig versus Missouri case says, you can't do that. That's a violation of Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1. The case says it. So I don't care when the case was written. It's inside our history. It's on the books, and anybody can read it. And it's not the only one that's valuable to this particular point. But how do I get out of paying a mortgage? I don't know. Why don't you just send your mortgage company a demand for a certified copy? And if you're brazen enough to go in and file a petition for writ of mandate in a court and drag your mortgage company in there and say, whoever you are that's claiming that I owe you something, and that if I don't pay you, you're going to be the one that's going to foreclose on me, then you have to also be the one that's holding the note. And there's another case, and it's not on the tip of my tongue, but I'll regurgitate it at some point, where the bank, whoever it is that's holding the mortgage, the note, and claiming that if you don't pay them, they can foreclose on you. Well, the Supreme Court has ruled on this little issue. They said, in order for you to claim, or in order for you to foreclose on a property, you got to be the holder of the note. That's just one element. But the point is that they sell the note after they deposit it in their own bank. That's where the big deal comes. And the banks are all making buku bucks all over the place on people's signature. And if you wonder how that happened, that's simple. That's HJR 192. That was 1933, just not too long after the Federal Reserve stuff and all that went through. So they actually Congress turned over the power of the Federal Reserve to generate numbers under HJR 192, and they made it a lien literally, on all the property. They call it a mortgage, on all the property of the people. All the property of the people. So if you wonder why you're paying property taxes and mortgage interest and all the contracts you signed, I don't care if it's automobile insurance contract, I don't care if it's a bank agreement, I don't care what it is in the public sector that you may have signed. It might even include your voter registration form. Every stinking thing you signed in your life, they monetize it. And they got their own rules about monetization. I think I last heard it was like 10 times of whatever the instrument was, which is why your birth certificates are all monetized. So the mortgage itself, you're going to have to stand up and do a little digging on your own and question the bank that you've been making all your payments to. And then you might want to find out what case is there on the books anywhere that taxes the land held under a land patent. And that's the only thing that touches the allodium. And that dictionary that I keep citing is not Merriam-Webster's. It's Noah Webster's dictionary of the English language, 1828. And I don't profess everything in that dictionary as being 100%, because it's not. And the reason it's not is because the guy that wrote it did the best he could with the information he had available and his knowledge of the difference between the English common law and the American common law. And there's a difference as wide as all outdoors. And I'll give you this one little piece in addition too. The English common law was written by a bunch of subjects with a monarch as their lord and master. The American common law was written by a bunch of, what are those guys? The patriots who got tired of the monarchy and fought a revolution to get out from underneath it. That's what birthed the American common law. And all the sovereignty, all the prerogatives, if you might want to look there, there's a document in our folders. It's called Blackstone's Commentaries. And that little document, chapter 7, which is entitled The King's Prerogatives. That's a very important word. And if you'll take a look, there's some Supreme Court cases, one of them specifically, and I don't have it right on the tip of my tongue, but it states that at the Revolution, all the prerogatives of the crown, what might they be? Well, Chapter 7's got a whole bunch of them in there. And what it says is that all the prerogatives of the crown evolved onto the people. And the subject of the crown is now a citizen of the state. So the sovereignty leads right back to where Article 4, Section 2 says it is. It's in state citizenship. The sovereignty has been there since the Revolution, if not before. Remember, there were a bunch of sovereign-minded people who got away from the crowns and all of their demonic crap. So this is not a hard lesson, but it takes a little time to line all your ducks up and sit down and write a little piece of paper to either go into court. And by the way, you got to remember something. The courts are all impacted with alien, non-registered individuals because they're all U.S. citizens. And that's an alien. That's a foreign entity in the states. And every stinking government, city, county, state, and feds have been impacted with that thing. And that's another whole question. You might want to ask the court, or you might want to even ask the banker who you're making your mortgage payments to. You guys U.S. citizens? There's some court cases that specifically identify that thing as doesn't exist in our system. There is no such thing as a U.S. citizen. So that's the ex parte Frank Knowles case. So there's a lot of really good citations, but what it's going to take is, in order for the sovereignty of this country to come back from where it's been, it's going to have to start getting educated on some simple history and being willing, because this is the biggest part, you got to be willing to walk into your sheriff's office or into your bank establishment or into your state legislative chamber or wherever the heck all these so-called laws have been written that they claim you're subject to, and find out who these people might be. And you're going to find out they're all in the same category. They're all non-registered foreign agents. They all work for a banking cartel. So if you think it's okay to that they can come and steal your bank account if you have one and take everything out because you weren't making a credit card payment, for instance, well, guess what? Not only the bank, but the court and the sheriff and everybody involved in this little fiasco, they're all being paid by the very thing that's telling you you owe them something. Talk about a convolution. Talk about, what do you call that? That's a monopoly from hell. So, you know, people are just ignorant. That's all there is to it. And if you want to get your head wrapped around some of this stuff, it's not complicated, but you got to be willing to stand up at some point.
Well, okay. Thank you so much for that explanation. That was a little bit more than explaining just that one thing, but that's great. It was a lot of information. Thank you. Jim, you heard that. Did you hear that question? Is there anything you want to add?
Oh, yeah. So the lien that was put on everybody's property, you have been intentionally misidentified, not as an American, but as a U.S. citizen. And as an American, you're not subject to primogeniture or entailments. And those are two terms you should look up. In order to be an American, like Mason said, we don't have the need for a mortgage. And the international banking crowd did their darndest to lie, cheat, and steal to us, about us. And it's all coming to an end if you're willing to enforce it. I yield.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can back up quite a bit about what Mason was just talking about from this this mortgage standpoint and this bogus deed for sale, deed for contract. There really is no such thing as mortgages. Call them mortgages. Everybody was under the misunderstanding that they held a mortgage, but they were basically a bogus deeds for sale or deeds for contracts. They the banking industry essentially cannot hold contracts for mortgages. They can only they forced people or made people believe that they could make you sign a contract for a deed of that you could make payments for a deed of contract as if you made the rental payments to and to hold title to that contract as long as you made the rental payments. So he discussed the Craig versus Missouri, and I believe it was 1820, and it still holds bearing. I got in contact with a lawyer, and that was willing to do some work pro bono, I guess you would say, public defender type, to help me because my mortgage isn't being held, or my deed for contract isn't being held. My service contract, not by my personal bank, it is being bank out of Chicago, and it's so convoluted that it's very difficult to navigate. But when I showed them the printout that I showed them of this case from Missouri, and they had a week or so to go over it, I got a call back, and they had never even studied this case in law school, and they had a time to take it and have a conference on it, and they think that it has merit, and it is a national case. It went before the state Supreme Court here in Missouri, and it basically showed that when they originally did these contracts here in Missouri, they were not, they should not have exceeded and held these kind of promissory notes for large contracts. They had large contracts, but they were essentially to be scattered out over many people. So anyway, they haven't really gotten back to me about getting into the courts They want to make sure that they have their ducks in a row, and they're they want to talk to me a little bit later, but I'm not into the weeds yet. But I want to tell you that everything that Mason has described and Jim has described has merit. We have standing that we can take a case if it happens to come to that point. But it looks very promising, and I don't know that my case will set any precedent, but my case started. I had my mortgage started, or my real estate deal started in '94, and it was managed to make a change in 2010 when it was modified, and then it was modified again because somebody made an error, and uh, 6 or 8 months later, that error was recognized, and they made a change on my modification, and they doubled my mortgage interest rate. And so there's a lot of things that should have been changed and they weren't changed, and I paid the price for that error for the last 14 years. So um, all that said, I think that it's very encouraging for these two men to be, and their wisdom, to be helpful to us, and they are encouraging to me, and they poke and prod, and they push, and encourage us to step to the edge and jump and step off, even though we don't we don't know the results before we know the questions. We need to trust and learn as much as we can, and do what we know that we need to do so that we can encourage and strengthen our lives, because there's so much to do and so many people that need to know that we've done something first, so they will follow in our footsteps. And I'm just so glad that these two men have come forward to help us and encourage us. And even though they probably don't think we move as fast as we should, but they've been a very big help to me, and I'm so thankful that they're here. And one thing I would like them to explain, when they were talking about the Constitution earlier, um, I saw our Jax and Jim talking or texting earlier about the three constitutions, and only the third one was in all caps. I guess that was the corporate constitution. And what would it take? My question is, what would it take to go back to either the second or the first one, where that was not in all caps? Is that all it would take to go back to the original framework and the original intent of the Constitution, or will it take some other act of Congress to put this um, act of Congress back in the box the way it was intended? And I've heard you all say that the electors that are in Congress now are not justified, and not or don't have any power and authority. What's it going to take for them to be rectified and authentic, and have their actually be state electors again? And so I'll pause and give it back to the floor.
Well, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you first to Lowtide for just acknowledging the help that you've gotten, and that Mason and Jim have been such a great help to you. I know that I have heard so many things that I would like to do, and I'm one of those that hasn't taken that step yet, mainly because I've been so busy. But I would love to take that step. And I just wanted to get that out there. And I thank them too for everything that they are doing for us, because they're bringing forth so much information that we all need to hear for sure. Okay, go ahead. Whichever one of you want to takes that.
Okay. To answer the question about the electors, the states of the Union have to redesignate the deputies to be sent to the American Congress. The American Congress has not been officially held in over 160 years. That thing sitting in DC is a foreign set of service contractors. They are no more American than Toyota of Japan or the old Nissan company. If you want to rebuild your government of the people, for the people, by the people, get involved in your respective state assembly, and then rebuild your assembly on your county. The American government is manned by you, and you. So if you aren't participating, there is no government. George Washington lived a couple of centuries ago, and George isn't going to do it today. The living, breathing souls that live today are responsible if they want their American government back. The role of self-responsibility scares the crap out of some people. We call it the nanny state. We were infiltrated, folks. We were dumbed down. Our teaching institutions were infiltrated in the early 1900s. Our vocabulary, which has been spoon-fed to us, puts us squarely standing in the cattle chute of slavery. The entire system was built around admissions and confessions. So if one doesn't have a comprehensive understanding of history and comprehends the errors of the past, they're pretty much doomed to relive them in the future. This is where Mason said this time in history is unlike years past. There's a book out there called The 5,000-Year Leap. It's a really good premise of what the Founding Fathers attempted to move around, getting away from monarchies. So, certain discussions have been held that this is pretty much a 30-year project of retraining the little ones who grow up to replace us and carry on. And folks like Mason and I, we're doing our best to help you navigate the water, so to speak. But you need to be encouraged and not scared, because the reptilians and other evil folks are systematically being removed permanently. I yield.
And that systematic removal is exactly why this is the time for all of these people who have been afraid of a system to stand up and show the system who the boss is. Because the ones that are going to be there aren't going to be the reptilians. And if there are any there at all, they'll be looking for somebody who's got a little brains to take a position that may be helpful to help the rest of the people in the neighborhood to wake up to the banking system and all the other demonic stuff that's been shoved down everybody's throat.
Well, along with the demonic system, we've been conditioned to do idolatry. Our love of money and thinking what it is, and some of our subconscious values, we've got to reprogram ourselves. So I have some pointed questions for you. What would happen if the IRS or the instant robbery service ceased to exist? What would happen if the actual purchase value of what you do earn had some merit to it, as in gold and silver coin, something of substance? The runaway inflation would disappear in 2.4 nanoseconds. The groundwork has been laid for this. And you're all going to be caught up in the middle of it. Embrace the change, but be part of the change. I yield.
Well, does anybody have any comments? Anybody else? Any comments or questions? Well, we've been going now for almost an hour, so if no one has any questions or any comments, I guess maybe we will put it into this call tonight. And I want to thank all of you for being here, and thank you so much for Mason and Jim and Lowtide for speaking tonight. And we will see you again next week. Okay, y'all have a great week. Bye-bye now.